Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very good afternoon to the audience. Firstly, I take the opportunity to thank the Food and Agriculture Organization of UN, FAO, for inviting me to share with you all some experiences that we have had in the furniture industry in Malaysia. What I am going to do over the next 10 minutes or so is basically tell you a story of the development of the furniture industry cluster in Malaysia. And as you are aware, Malaysia is now among the top 10 furniture exporters in the world. So the story begins with a little background of industry classes. I think there is a lot of research has been done in the past about industry classes, the roles they play. I think the theoretical understanding of the importance is very well established. And in many nations, industry classes play a role either directly or indirectly in the development of various industrial sectors. One of the most important factors of industrial clusters is it provides rapid development for resource intensive industries, and in the case of Malaysia that has been the case with our wood-based industry. A brief introduction to the Malaysian wood industry. Malaysia is literally a young nation. We got independence in 1957. And we just celebrated our 54th Independence Day. Despite being a young nation, we have moved up the rank with the development of the wood-based industry, and as of in the year 1985, since 1985, the industry has become a very important socio-economic sector. At present, it stands with an employment of almost 350,000 workers in the sector. And the wood-based industry has replaced the rubber industry as the second most important non-petroleum commodity sector. First, it's the oil palm, then it's the wood-based industry, and thirdly is the rubber industry. Now, looking at Malaysia, what has actually happened is the development can be traced into 4 different stages. There's this pre-industrial master plan stage. Since independence, we have imported a lot of furniture. We were a net exporter of commodities, saw logs, sawn timber, and very little value-added products. The first industrial master plan came into effect in '86, and with that, one of the clauses was there was an immediate ban on the export of saw logs and an imposition of a levy of 120 Malaysian ringgit, which works out to be about $45 on current exchange rate per cubic meter. Now what that did was it forced a lot of upstream sawmillers to look at downstream opportunities. Now that brought about a lot of transformation in the industry, and we found that value-added activities grew rapidly. And then in 1996, the second industrial master plan was brought into effect. Now this master plan paid a lot of attention to extending the value addition, which means certain sectors were given preferential tariffs, preferential treatment, preferential financial incentives to boost their growth. And in 2006, the third industrial master plan came into effect. Now what it provided is, it provides very intensive marketing and innovation incentives for manufacturers to really take wood product to a higher level. So to basically recap what these industrial master plans have done, it has basically been the role that the government has played in the development of the Malaysian wood industry. Now, what has been the growth drivers? Now, we had a lot of rubber plantations Malaysia is still a large producer of natural rubber. Almost 1.6 million hectares of land is under rubber cultivation. Labor has been ample. A lot of capital outlay came about because when the ban was brought into effect, the ban on the export of logs as well as the levy was imposed on the export of sawn timber, a lot of Taiwanese furniture manufacturers who used to consume a lot of the Malaysian timbers relocated their operation from Taiwan into Malaysia. Now that brought about a big spurt in the development of the Malaysian furniture industry. And there is also government policies that provided the favorable business climate and also a lot of technology application. Now in terms of raw materials, we are highly dependent on rubber wood because that is the single most important material for us. Despite us being a large exporter of tropical hardwood, the question of availability, or rather the inconsistent in the availability of tropical hardwood, does not augur well for furniture manufacturing. Because if you want to develop a furniture industry, then you must have a very stable supply of particular species that goes or that is very well accepted by the international market. So in that context, I think rubber has proven to be a very big success with Malaysian furniture manufacturing. Almost 80% of the furniture that's produced in Malaysia is made out of rubber wood. And lately, we have started with the use of oil palm trunk. We call it palm lumber, and it is presently the first trial container has been shipped out to South Africa, producing educational furniture, and it's marketed under the brand name Tiger Wood. Why Tiger Wood? If you look at oil palm lumber, the texture resembles the stripes that you find on the tiger. So we are not sure whether this material will be successful, but it is the first trial container that has been shipped out. So hopefully it works. So apart from oil palm, there are other materials available, but we don't have that in large quantities. So it is basically confined to rubber as well as oil palm. Now labor force. I think this is it is a myth that a lot of developing countries have cheap labor. I think this is something that we will have to break away because Malaysia used to be cheap. Now it is expensive. As a result of that, 43% of our workforce in the furniture industry are imported workers. We are highly dependent on workers from Indonesia, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. And they make up such a big amount. Now, because of that, there is also the other problem. Because they are foreign contract workers, there is the element of skill retention. Because they would leave after some time. So that skill that they have acquired over their service is going to be moved elsewhere. So this is a problem that we face, and I think all developing countries will go through this. And in my travels to China, I have also seen this. It's also becoming a little bit expensive now in China. It's also getting a little bit expensive in Vietnam, even in Indonesia. Now, one of the things that the government has done, which is a very good, I would say, scheme, is creating what we call a human resource development fund, which mandates all companies employing more than 50 workers will have to contribute 2% of your total payroll per annum to a fund for retraining of the workers. Now, which means training opportunities, funded training opportunities are ample. So that seemed to be the incentive for manufacturers to employ locals, train them, move them up to a higher skill level. Now, capital outlay, this is another important topic. I think the wood industry is one industry that is starved of capital. In developing countries, investment into new technology is relatively slow, and that's also the case also in Malaysia. Now, how do we go about this? Which means there has got to be certain provision provided by, again, through government policies where the funding mechanism has got to be made available for reinvestment into technologies. And that has been made, and it has been provided for on the annual budget that's announced by the government, and that's taking place. Generally speaking, as the industry matures, we find less and less foreign direct investment in the country, and that's the case. Some 10 years ago, the total capital outlay, 65% of that capital outlay were basically FDIs, but now it has reduced to about 30%. The vast majority of the enterprises are domestically owned. Now, technology application is on the increase. As labor cost increases, more companies will look at technology, and the Malaysian market size for machinery and new technology is about 50 million US dollars per annum. Now, government policies are very important. I think we have heard in some of the previous presentation looking at development of industry in other countries. I think these are some of the messages that we can share with you, or some of the experience that we have in Malaysia, looking at what are the provisions that the government can actually lay out in order to develop a particular industry. Now, industrial structure. The wood-based industry, especially the furniture industry, 85% of the manufacturers are small and medium. Only 15% are large establishments. But the top 50 manufacturers contribute 85% of total exports, meaning which clusters are in place. The small enterprises are providing components, they become part of the supply chain, they add value, they provide diversity in the product, and they give you flexibility in production. So these are very important characteristics if we are involved in a furniture industry, which is what we would consider a fashion industry. Because unless you provide diversity, unless you are prepared to supply mixed containers, then you have a chance to actually compete in the global market. Now, clusters in action. One of the best examples that I can quote as far as Malaysia is concerned is the Muar Furniture Cluster. Now, Muar is located about 180 kilometers north of Singapore. So there is a close proximity to the port. It's also close to the resources, large pool of carpenters, family-owned business with more than 20 years experience, a large network of supporting industries, and good infrastructure. Now, I think this table here will give you an insight about what clusters can do. Now, number of skilled carpenters. Over this period, there has been a huge increase in the number of skilled carpenters because the clusters require carpenters to produce prototypes. Tooling and machinery suppliers has also seen a big increase, and so forth. So what it actually provides is, the cluster provides an environment, a very competitive environment that spurs value addition, spurs industrial growth. Now, other clusters, these are some of the areas, but the ones in red are very interesting. These are government initiated clusters. Uluyam, Taiping, and Setiu, where the government provided a huge sum of money to develop the clusters, and most of these clusters literally went bust or disappeared from the scene over a period of 3 to 5 years. So which means government policies can spur growth up to a point, and then the industry has got a much bigger role to play to actually maintain that growth. Now, what are the benefits? The Muar Furniture Cluster organizes a large exhibition, which is an annual exhibition. About $5 million is set aside to support trade and marketing activities. It's a very well-networked industrial hub. Now, within the cluster, things like market potentials, raw material supply, labor issues, training needs, and government license is also taken care of by the cluster itself. What does a cluster do? it provides employment. It basically supports the livelihood. 63% of the available workforce in that area is either directly or indirectly employed in the furniture industry. It's a training ground for future woodworkers. It's a training ground for potential entrepreneurs. Very important. And it preserves the generation-old tradition of woodworking. So, as far as Malaysia is concerned, there is a lot of focus on looking at how we can keep that particular cluster in Muar sustained. Now, what are the challenges? Of course, there's a strong ex-employer-employee loyalty exhibited. So, this, in some ways, it distorts competitiveness. It focuses on economies of scale. Now, that is a negative point. Because if you are a large producer, then obviously you are looking for certain type of mass merchandises. You would prefer a buyer like IKEA, Walmart, Kmart, or Pier 1 or Lazy Boy or guys like that. You wouldn't want to deal with people like Pottery Barn and so forth. So that sort of creates a market distortion. Then there is the low entry barrier. Because the wood industry has got a very low entry barrier, it creates a lot of new establishments every year. Small suppliers coming in, so there is intense domestic rivalry, and there's also a very high degree of supply elasticity. Everybody produces what everybody else is producing. There is also the other issue about trading rather than manufacturing, because when the competitiveness increases to a level which is beyond control, then a lot of guys would rather do trading than manufacturing. Now, this is unhealthy for the cluster itself. And the value chain within the cluster also suffers because you have a lot of guys duplicating what everybody else is doing. Okay, future challenges, I'll just run through this. Raw materials, very important. I can't emphasize on this. We are a large producer, but our natural forest production is about 8 million cubic meters a year. Now we are hoping to maintain that, and aggressive forest plantation schemes are already in place, but we are not sure whether it will bear fruit as per the plan. Now labor, I think if you are a woodworker, you suffer the 3D syndrome. Okay, there is very little interest among youngsters to get into the woodworking industry. It's a low wage economy. We don't see much wage increase if you are in the wood product sector. Now, it's also dependent on contract foreign workers, so this is unsustainable. Now, capacity, too many mills chasing too little resources because of the low entry barrier. So, supply elasticity, capacity utilization not optimum, and reinvestment is relatively low. So, policy instruments, this is very important. Innovation and creativity is stagnating. Okay, success factors are just competitive input, competitive business environment, stimulating market accessibility, R&D, technology innovation. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to take any questions later on. Thank you.